so hi everyone, and welcome to Women to Watch 2027 Begins, the book as art. And this event is presented by the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA, or for the National Museum of Women in the Arts. And I'm your host today, Jamie Austin, and I also serve on the executive board as the chair of the programming committee. And this event marks the official kickoff of our group's participation in Women to Watch 2027, a book arts revolution, book arts evolution. It could be a revolution too. I think it's both. But Women to Watch 2027, a book arts evolution. And before we jump in today's presentation, I'd like to invite our board president, Lorna Meyer-Callis, to say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for coordinating our Women to Watch and for Anthea being our curator. And I know you were so instrumental in that. And Anthea, I want to welcome you and let you know how excited we are to have you join us in this great endeavor, and welcome all our members and say how much we all appreciate everything you do for this incredible group. And so without further ado, Jamie, let me turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lorna. And I'm so excited to help kick off Women to Watch 2024, a book arts evolution. And I do welcome Grace DeWitt, who said hi to everyone who's joining us from NMWA tonight. So thank you for being here. Now, since this theme has been announced for this cycle of Women to Watch, the number one question that has been asked is, what is book arts? And so it is my privilege today to welcome our region's consulting curator, Anthea Black, to help answer this question for us. Now, Anthea Black is a Canadian artist, art publisher, and curator based in San Francisco and Toronto. Today, Anthea will introduce you to their studio practice, their curatorial practice, their writing practice, and then give a talk titled "The Book as Art: Modern and Contemporary Women Artists to Know." And then we'll make you wait till almost the end. They will reveal the next round of nominated artists. And I did also want to thank, I see Julia and Catherine, and thank you for the current NMWA artists who are here joining us today as well. So with that, I will pass things over to Anthea. And you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody, and thank you. Thank you for this awesome opportunity. And thank you for coming to this event. It's so cool to be able to meet you. I know that I have met some of you in person, and that we'll have many opportunities over the next year to 2 years to get to know each other. And so I'm really excited and honored to be selected as the curator for Women to Watch 2027, and look forward to talking to you a bit today. So I will get started. And if at any point there's any sort of technical things or you can't hear me, just go ahead and turn on your mic and let me know. And so I'll share my screen and we can get started. Let's go for it. Okay, good. So you should see my slides now. How does that look?
It looks great.
Wonderful. Okay. So again, thank you very much. And I hope that this will illuminate a little bit of what we'll be doing together over the next couple of years. And please ask me questions at the end. I'll be very excited to have a little bit of a conversation. So as Jamie mentioned, first I'll present a little bit about some of my curatorial influences, actually, and some of the work that I make in the artist book form and field. And then I will move on to a few examples of some modern women artists, some of whom you will probably recognize, and a few artist books by those artists, and some artist books that I think have defined important moments in book arts history, and then the reveal of our 3 nominees that are already submitted to the National Museum of Women in the Arts for consideration for the Women to Watch exhibition in 2027. So again, my name is Anthea Black. I'm Associate Professor of Print Media and Artist Books here at California College of the Arts. And I also work as an artist and writer and curator independently from my role at CCA. So first, a little bit about my work. As an artist, I am equally drawn to aspects of abstraction and embodied practice in the studio as a maker who is keenly attuned to, paper and print towards ink, all of those sensual properties of making that really translate into the joy and the beauty of studio practice for me. In addition to those fascinations, I am also really driven by aspects of feminism and queer feminism, by conceptual conversations about what abstraction is and what it can do politically, and as well as questions about representation of women and queer people and trans people and people of color as a broader sort of sense of how identity relates to the things that we make as artists and what kind of conversations happen around that. So my work tends to ping pong between pieces like this, an 84-page artist book installation in collaboration with the artist Taya Yabet. And we really came at this piece with a sense of what does it mean for two women artists to meet in the space of the artist book page? And we worked simultaneously on this piece to develop these abstract patterns, and they became the space that defined our interactions between us. Neither of us holding or taking more space than the other, but maintaining a perfect balance between the contributions that each one of us was making. Myself as a white, queer, feminist artist with a lot of questions about how my gender is perceived in the world, and her as a Chinese Filipino Canadian artist whose identity is really read through aspects of race and of being a racialized Asian woman. So this collaboration was about 15 years ago, but it really defined the beginning of my interest in abstraction in the artist book form and led me to, I think, where I am today, which is about, which in my studio practice, where I'm making artist books that answer an important question for me about the nature of abstraction and perception. And that question is, how do you make an artist book that has no beginning, no middle, no end, no text, and can be read or experienced from any direction, where no way of reading is wrong, but all potential orientations are correct? And so I've been trying to solve this question in my practice for many years. And this new series of work is really where I've ended up with. And I use techniques that are very common in bookbinding and artist books, using prints, both made in etching, letterpress, monotype, and woven together, as well as other common materials in bookbinding like board and cloth and all of the things you would see in a traditional binding, but coming together in a very non-traditional way. So this is 3 views of the same book. All my work is movable and sculptural. And a few other pieces from my personal practice, which investigate aspects of the book form. And the idea of creating a piece that has no correct orientation really comes from a sense of wanting to have an embodied understanding of what sexuality or gender could add to abstraction, but in a very nonlinear, non-didactic kind of way. This is Grieve Weave number 19. There's about 23, 24 pieces in this series. And Each one of them answers that question in a different way. And then moving on to some curatorial work, my curatorial subjectivity in terms of approaching artist books was really formed by one of the very first curatorial projects that I ever did, which was to curate this incredible roving library that was housed in a Airstream trailer and contained about 300 artist books, zines, and publications. And it traveled across Canada and the United States for 5 years between 2020 and 2025. It went to galleries, to bookstores, to community centers, to libraries, to prisons. And there was something about curating this project for a stop at my gallery that I was working with at the time that really changed the way I was thinking about the work of art and its ability to engage with its audience. The thing that was so amazing about this project was that it involved so many artists and that you were invited into this space to have an encounter that was not only about going into a gallery space and looking with your eyes, but that was very much about the capacity for an artwork to hold our attention for a long time, that we can sit, that we can discuss, that we can hold in our hands a piece of artwork, and that it becomes this social tool and way to really engage the senses beyond only the eye. And so this became a lifelong curatorial fascination, and ping-ponging back with a few other projects, I considered one of my next projects, the HIV Howler, to be a curatorial work within the format of a newspaper. So touching upon the aspect of artist books and artist publishing that interfaces with print technologies that are used in mass media. This is one of the ways that artists started making artist books in the modern time period, was to work with commercial printers, to work with letterpress, and to use these tools as a way to communicate art ideas. So HIV Howler was a more socially engaged project, touching on those aspects of identity that I spoke about being important to me in my practice. A collaboration with a large group of people living and working with HIV, and a global conversation that took place in the context of this newspaper, going a lot deeper than the content that you might see in a doctor's office about HIV or AIDS, or that you might hear from an international development agency, but really thinking about the stories and experiences and lives of people living with HIV. And this newspaper, artist newspaper project, was curated by myself and my girlfriend at the time, Jessica Lynn Whitbread. Another personal project that relates to the curatorial collaborative aspects of artist books, handbooks supporting queer and trans students in art and design education. And this book was co-authored by a large group of students working together to have conversations about how we could improve art and design education for queer and trans students, and to really think about the experiences of teaching and learning and equity, DEI, as they say, in the context of the studio space, of the printmaking studio space. And so by creating this hands-on opportunity to work with artists in the printmaking studio, we hand printed this book. I include this image for a couple different reasons. One, because it shows the process of creating this book, but the other because it shows the letterpress Vandercook, which is a very accessible, exciting way that many artists are using to print handmade limited editions using movable type, wood type, metal type to create their works. So that's a little aspect of the production that is important there. So this book was produced in an edition, hand printed in an edition of 1200, and for me, touched on the aspect of community participation in the artist book making process, and using the book as a real vehicle for timely and important information that could be widely distributed. A final project of mine that I will share that leads really nicely into Women to Watch 2027 and the focus on the artist book is my recent exhibition, Embodied Press, Queer Abstraction and the Artist Book. And this exhibition toured to Canada, United States here in Berkeley, and to Korea, to Seoul, Korea. And it involved about 24 artists. And I really consider this show to be an opportunity for me as a curator and a critic to define some of what I saw as being some of the most interesting and important queer and trans artists working in the artist book form today. So these are works by Nick Schick and Stan Schellebarger and Dutz Miller in the background. The premise of this exhibition was taking my interest in abstraction and thinking about how queer and trans artists were using abstraction in the artist book form to revel in these material possibilities of paper, of ink, the beautiful saturation of ink that's possible printing on letterpress, moving across the page, of paper cutting, of aspects of form that could be both traditional, as you see on the right with the drum leaf binding, or experimental, as you see on the left with paper cuttings that open up to reveal a space that's not unlike a map that you can see through. So this exhibition included works from the 1980s to today, and some installation shots here, particularly a work that became particularly important to me was Lyman Piersma's Going to Camp, a meditation on AIDS and personal loss. And this book was published by a studio called Women's Studio Workshop in 1987, just a year before the artist passed away from AIDS-related complications. And Women's Studio Workshop is a really revolutionary site for the production of artists' books in North America. And I would encourage everybody to look them up. This is just one piece from their catalog of books that they've produced over the years. But as you can see, it has a really beautiful experimental format. There's many aspects of it that are handmade. It opens into a large accordion shape, and this book was created with multiple layers of screen printing, including also some photocopy collage elements that were tipped in at different angles to the book. An example of the installation that was in Korea, where I responded a little bit more to the aspect of Korean culture around the distribution of art and design publications through an exhibition design that was more envisioned as a reading room than as an exhibition, as a gallery-based exhibition space. And also including performance in the exhibitions. So when I was approaching the sense of how do I curate an exhibition that conveys the depth of artist book practices, it was important for me that the show did not only include books, but that it could be porously moving across practices of painting, printmaking, performance, film and video, and many other media. So this is a commissioned performance by an artist named Megan Adey, and she was based in San Francisco for many years. She's now based in Copenhagen, called Hush. And this was a paper orchestra that created a series of instruments out of sheets of varying different weights and sizes of paper that could be played in a score that she would act as the conductor for. So that gives a sense of, on the outer limit for me, of what could be considered an artist book, this sense of the radical performativity of reading of the book and of the sort of properties of paper being able to engage the senses. And in this case, the sense of hearing beyond beyond a discrete object, right? So this is also informing some of my thoughts around how I've approached curating Women to Watch for the book as art. And oh, there is one more. These are just a few more letterpress printed books from the exhibition. So now moving into some questions about, what an artist book is and how they've been imagined by various different women artists in the modern period. I have 5 or 6 quotations, which I'll read a few of, but these chart the evolution of the artist book from the mid-70s to today. This is Pat Steer, painter, artist, and bookmaker. And she says, I like artist books because they're 1, portable, 2, durable, 3, inexpensive, not always true nowadays, 4, intimate, 5, non-precious, 6, replicable, 7, historical, and 8, universal. So there's another quote that I love from book art historian Kathy Walkup's history about Bay Area book arts. And she says that once women had access to the means of production, they started making books. And so here in the Bay Area in the 1970s period, there was this fabulous explosion of women artists making books all through California as well, going down to the Women's Building in LA under the direction of Sheila Lebretteville and Judy Chicago. So a few more. Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press. We would recognize Kitchen Table from the works of Sherry Moraga and Audre Lorde, and they were the first press that was dedicated to the works of women of color. And in their editorial statement, they said, I want encouragement to be as bold or bolder than I dared to be. And they talked about artist book publishing as a way to create a conversation amongst women of color and to, as they say, dare each other to really embody and enable the production of their work as it, really has come to stand as a defining moment in artist publishing. Our very own Betsy Davids, who's Professor Emerita here from CCA, and I will say now the subject of a retrospective that I'm curating for San Francisco Center for the Book next year. Betsy Davids introduced letterpress printing to hundreds of students over the years at CCA, and she says there are more producers of artists' books than there are consumers. It's true democracy and bad business. And I really like this because it speaks to the economy of artists' bookmaking and what it enables. It enables conversation, it enables exchange of ideas. It's not necessarily something that is centered around commerce in the same way that other artistic practices are. It can exist outside of commercial gallery spaces, and it can be exchanged and given as a gift. And I think that Betsy's very interested in those side economies of artist books. Johanna Drucker, probably one of the most well-known and influential CCA alumni to become an artist bookmaker. Her work is absolutely fabulous, and she talks about the conviction of making a book and the necessity that something become a book. So I'll go through a few more. One that just really is important to me, create, publish, distribute, and build a social ecosystem around your efforts. So again, thinking about the book as being an inherently social space. A few examples from the modern period. This is Blaise Cendrars and Sonia Delaunay. Some art historians call this the first artist book of the modern period, and I think it's worth noting that it also is steeped in an incredible amount of mystery and fascination around how this book was created. It is the subject of a documentary by Kitty Marriott, who's a living artist bookmaker who sought to do a reissue of this work. The original was made in 1931. It was printed on letterpress with pochoir stencil, and it was intended to be a much larger edition than was produced. One of the things that's special and exciting about this work is the side-by-side evolution of the typography and the images. It's a very long accordion book, and the mixing of typography. This edition that was recreated by California artist Kitty Marriott is a fabulous piece to look into, and it's a way that the living legacy of this original has continued to inspire artist bookmakers in the contemporary time. This is Kara Walker's collaboration with Toni Morrison, 5 poems. This is a piece that would fall more into the fine press side of bindings. So thinking about working with authors, very much interfacing with the literary community, poets and authors, working together with artists, printers, sometimes paper makers, and of course, bookbinders. So again, thinking of the collaborative nature of the work, of course, 2 artists who have a monumental presence in American art, Kara Walker and Toni Morrison, coming together for this handmade edition and printed here in Berkeley by Peter Koch. A page spread that shows the hand-set typography and the prints that accompany the piece. Kara Walker has some additionally incredible artists' books. One that's in the collection of the CCA library, which is called Fable. And it is a pop-up book that very much resembles her large-scale installations with cut paper. Louise Bourgeois, a prolific artist bookmaker. Primarily, some of my favorite artist books of Bourgeois are made using etching, and specifically the etching technique of dry point etching. So very immediate drawerly style. Later in her life and in her practice, she moved on to creating the beautiful textile works that many of us are probably familiar, and many artists' books using textiles as well. So just showing the aspects of the book from the most formal to experimental in terms of their materials, working in textiles with pattern and text as well. This is Julie Chen, another influential artist bookmaker from the Bay Area, whose work is already included in the National Museum of Women in the Arts collection and was part of the original Book as Art exhibition 20 years ago that we, in some ways, are revisiting the ideas that were behind the exhibition, and Julie's work is well collected by the museum as well. So a few pieces by her, known for her exquisite craftsmanship and printing, and developing the book art form here through Mills College, another site of really influential teaching and learning around the book art form in the Bay Area. This is Taube Auerbach's Float, an artist using really experimental, exciting materials in the artist book form. This book is made of polycarbonate and can be viewed under different aspects of illumination. And so the way that the book is understood and perceived in light versus in dark, where it has an inner illumination, is very much engaged with this formal geometric properties that she's so interested in her practice. A few more here. This is Colette Fu, documenting many different indigenous cultures and tribes that are native to China, and working with imagery through the pop-up book form. Really incredible contemporary photography-based artist books. And I wish I had an image of this one closed, but her books are so phenomenal because they fold up completely flat, and then as pop-ups, they reveal this incredibly exquisite sculptural space, all based on her own documentary photography work that she does. And another book from the history of Women's Studio Workshop. This is Clarissa Sly's What's Happening with Mama. Very much an important feminist artwork from the 1980s time period. And this work talks about a main character, which sometimes is interpreted to be her experience witnessing her mother giving birth to her baby sister. And so What's Happening with Mama is originally based on a Van Dyke Brown print. It's translated into screen print and letterpress. You'll see that the accordion book format opens to reveal these little staircases of poetic text, and that's where the story unfolds from, of her experience with hearing these strange sounds from her mother's bedroom and wondering what was going on. And by the end of the book, her baby sister has been born. So Clarissa Sly is one of the artists who I'm writing about in my new book about queer and trans artists working in the artist book form. She was also a curator of a very important historical exhibition that traveled throughout the 90s called Coast to Coast, a Women of Color artists book project. And that exhibition gave, again, in terms of thinking about the precedents for artist book making in our contemporary moment, that gave hundreds of women of color artists a venue to show their work across 10 sites of a touring exhibition. So this is Clarissa Sly's work, and she was a curator of artist books who also, influenced many artists. And a final piece from Rhiannon Skye Tafoya, an Indigenous artist drawing from her family's traditional weaving practices in basketry and adapting those works into an artist book form that opens to reveal a series of paper weavings. And this is, I would say, one of my very favorite artist books in contemporary practice at the moment, published by Women's Studio Workshop, and unfolding to reveal this meticulously crafted basket structure, and really reaching back into, again, Indigenous histories of basketry and bringing those into the artist book form as well. So she would be a very special artist to also introduce as part of this presentation. And now from our region, I'm excited to share the work of our 3 nominees that have been submitted as curatorial selections to National Museum of Women in the Arts. And these are the selections that I made after doing a series of studio visits and research through the spring and summer of artists working in the Bay Area. I visited artist studios, I read critical works, I consulted artists' websites, I spoke to artists and looked at, I spoke to artists and I said, who are you interested in? Who comes to mind? And so it was a really nice process. And I thank you again for the opportunity to spend some time in our community researching and connecting with so many artists. In the end, I, of course, chose 3 candidates, and I'd like to present them now. I'll share some of their work, and we will get a chance to get to know them a lot better through the next year, culminating in the exhibition that Jamie and I will collaborate on in September of 2026. So here they are, drum roll. My first nomination is Vivian Sming of Sming Sming Books. And Vivian is a Bay Area artist and publisher. She has been publishing under the press name of Sming Sming Books for just under 10 years. And in the process of selecting her work, I was deeply moved by her sense of ethics around the creative and curatorial aspects of editing a book, of the collaborative aspects of publishing, and her commitment to making artist books by hand, using very modest technologies. So she is not a fine press artist who works in letterpress or handmade paper, but she is an artist bookmaker and publisher who works with very commonplace tools like spiral binders and photocopiers to create her work. Some of the aspects of her practice as as a publisher that resonate with me are her conceptual and political rigor in bringing forth work that is experimental and engaging artists whose work might be difficult to define in an artist book form. This is a recent book. You can see some of her signature characteristics. Vivian often loves to publish with really bold typography and with neon colors, and moving away from fine bindings and more towards readily accessible technologies like these great neon spirals. She often engages with aspects of feminism, work by women, work that aims to dismantle white supremacy and really give voice to experiences of artists of color. So this is Rebecca Devika Dharmapalan's work. My pen is sharp like the gun in my hand, and talking about women revolutionaries, with documentation, essays, lovely inserts, and of course, this fabulous typography that I've come to love so much about Vivian's design. This is a work that she printed at San Francisco Center for the Book, which is called If You See Me, Weep. It's a small handheld piece that talks about climate catastrophe from the perspective of a stone. And the piece is involving a lot of hand-done suminagashi paper marbling and dyeing. Every aspect of the book is unique, and each opens into narratives of very sophisticated kind of intertwining of questions of ecology, climate, and politics of these specific sites that she explores, these specific sites of specific stones in her work. So that's a recent piece that she's created. All the way to another aspect that I really appreciate about her work, which is reissuing and publishing difficult to find ephemeral works. This is Pro Mom, a sex worker's guide to parenting. There were two editions of this, one that was kind of more handmade and one that was a more commercial edition. So also confronting, something that might be considered a deeply feminist topic, but potentially a taboo aspect of women's experience of sex work. This is her published work by Keto Jackson, Restored Access, looking at landscape from a Black perspective and farming communities through archival photographs and these beautiful sort of page spreads that extend across the landscape that this book is exploring. And a few other pieces. One of the things that really stood out again for me about Vivian was how prolific she is and how generous she is in creating these editions in collaboration with very close working proximity with many different artists, and her ability to bring forward ideas through very careful material choices. So this is a really long, skinny publication by Linda Hung, and a few interpage typography spreads. I think that's she's also worked quite a bit with Bay Area artist Indira Allegra. These are two issues of from early in Vivian's artist book and publishing work. Blackout from June 2017, and a beautiful set of 6 small books, 5 by 5 inches, by Indira Allegra. These are some of the inner page book covers, and another piece more recently by Indira Allegra, Tension Studies. And now I will move on to our second artist. Maybe one more thing to say about Vivian. Her work really stands out for me in her aspect of distribution, working in the San Francisco Artist Book Fairs and beyond as well, thinking about the artist book not only as a curatorial and discursive space, but really a space that responds to the precarity that many artists feel working in the Bay Area. So enabling a kind of practice that can be mobile and have a strong sense of integrity, while also having a lot of staying power and not necessarily relying on the economic structure of galleries and museums in order for it to be distributed and widely accessible. So that is some of the reasons why I chose Vivian for our exhibition. Announcing our second artist, Macy Chadwick from In Cahoots Press. Macy, I would say, certainly can be characterized within the Bay Area's history of letterpress, fine press, and artist book lineage. And her work has a strong emphasis on hand printing, using letterpress, as well as typography and pressure printing. And I would characterize her work by allowing these very precise typesetting moments, very precise poetic typesetting moments to sort of float in a really elegant and minimalist space. She is a absolutely phenomenal letterpress printer, and she also is very interested in aspects of structure of artists' books and thinking about how we experience the structure of the piece. This is Pathways, one of my favorite works by Chadwick, that uses translucency to convey the circulatory system diagrams. And a lot of glass, translucent paper, pochoir stencil, and typography, as well as hand sewing going into this piece. Another page spread from this one. So laser cut stencils, also a very interesting aspect of this work. Again, showing Macy's interest in circulatory systems. This was produced for San Francisco Center for the Book's Small Plates project, and it's a really wonderful binding that opens to create a full large page spread about the process of creative ideation, and an up-close image to really see the different layers of ink and how that letterpress materiality translates into Macy's work. A few more here. This is Macy's most recent work called Waiting for Rain. It was created in response to climate anxiety and seasonal changes in the Bay Area ecology. And this is a piece where I think her skill as a printer and bookbinder is on full display. She's used these lovely hand-done relief blocks, so lino cuts, to create the imagery of a seasonal experience, moving from the driest season to the rainy season, and her experience of how that those seasonal changes were affected by climate change in California. You can see that the book uses translucency as well as she does in some of her other works to document these seasonal moments of intense rain, intense dryness. And this is a piece where the crinkly handheld aspects of the paper as you turn the page become really important to the experience. And Macy selected all of these papers for the auditory experience of how they would sound dry in your hands when you were reading the book. This page conveys the fire season when fire threatens Northern California, and the ash is floating up through dark skies. And finally, the relief of the rain coming. This is a piece that she worked on over the course of about 2 years. All of the imagery on the inside is hand printed on letterpress, all of the typography as well. And then a few additional images going to the eventual kind of greening up of the landscape and documenting that moment when the sky turned orange here in our Bay Area landscape. A little bit of a close-up of the binding, a beautiful binding, and of the printing as well. One of the things that I appreciate about Macy, beyond the work and the contribution that she makes through her artistic practice, is also that she has created a very generous and welcoming artist book residency where she hosts artists working in printmaking, artist books, and also writers in Cahoots residency. And so I've selected Macy for Women to Watch for her exquisite technical work in the artist book form, but also her work to build a space of hospitality and support for artists working in the field. And now I present our final artist, Kate Laster. And Kate Laster is representing what I would say is a completely different part of the artist book field from either Vivian or Macy. Whereas Vivian is working across curatorial and discursive aspects of publishing, and Macy is working across hand printing aspects of fine press books and just the materiality of print and paper through her practice. Kate is an artist who approaches a multidisciplinary practice that includes a lot of DIY elements and everything from stencils to spray paint to paper cuts. She's very engaged with the paper cutting traditions that are quite cross-cultural, thinking of papel picado from Latinx and Chicano cultures to the beautiful intricate paper cuts that come from many different Asian traditions, and adapting these to a very sort of urgent poetic utterance. And I would also say that Kate is quite a writer in her practice, thinking about poetry and how to make poetry kind of explode across the page of the artist's book. So her books often, her books are always one of a kind. They're very, very rarely editioned objects, but objects that kind of come into the world with this sense of urgency, rallying cries, activism, the sense that the work could be used as a stencil to spray paint into a public space, or it could be used as a map that could tell a story about a specific geography. And I would connect her work to the history of artists' zines, posters, printmaking, and activism, where the urge to create is really deeply connected to a sense of an artist's political and graphic consciousness and their work as an activist. So Kate is also a teacher. During the pandemic, she taught free printmaking classes in print history, in activist print history, for anybody who wanted to join over Zoom. And just such an interesting way to dive into the mind of this wonderful artist and all of the influences that she brings to her hand-cut text and typography. And so some works by Kate. These are created with oftentimes a lot of dialogue in mind. This piece says learning to experience, identify, hold a feeling, abortion, choice, is healthcare, is urgent. And so you can see how some of the ways that she moves across the page allow for the remixing of these texts. So you could read this as abortion is healthcare, choice is urgent, or you could read it with the other aspects of the page. So thinking about reproductive justice, thinking about aspects of things that have been long fought uh, feminist contributions, and envisioning these in her incredible book formats. And you can see the pages also, maybe I'll just skip back. The pages also have, remnants of paint and spray paint. And it's clear that she not only uses and creates these works as artist's books, but also in this performative way where she activates the work in public spaces. So in that sense, just as they are artist books, they're also protest banners, they're also maps, they're also posters or guidebooks. And these are some ways that she activates the work, flags or kites, and performs the work in relation to the Bay Area geographies where she is living. A few more pieces from Kate's practice. And again, one of the things that I just really appreciate about her work is how she challenges ideas of reading and ideas of craftsmanship. I think bringing in this DIY politicized aesthetic that might be just as at home in a protest as it is in a gallery space is really exciting to me. And I love exhibiting her work. She was one of the artists that I curated in the Embodied Press Queer Abstraction and the Artist book. And the way that her work is activated by the shadows is equally interesting as it is in the gallery, as it is when you're experiencing it out in the world. So a few more pieces from Kate's practice, just an absolutely prolific collager and prolific maker. Of course, for everything that you cut out of the surface of an artist book, you have all of these fabulous scraps. So she leaves no scrap unused in her work. And you can really see that sort of spirit of making that comes through in her work. And I appreciate it so much for the way that she challenges the material expectations of what a book is or what a book should look like. And I think that might be maybe a close-up of Kate's work, and that might be it in terms of the introductions of our three artists. And again, I just really want to thank everybody for your attention and the opportunity to do this work together with you, and look forward to continuing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anthea. And there was such a richness in that presentation as you walked us through time and then also introduced the three new
There was so
2027 Women to
many
Watch.
that I could have added.
We can sign you up for another presentation. Don't worry.
In person next time, we got to look at some artist books in our hands.
That would be
I will
amazing.
stop sharing my screen. Is that right, Jamie?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay,
Yeah, you
wonderful.
can stop sharing your screen. And I know we're at time, but that was such an amazing presentation. I'm sure members have questions that they're just dying to ask. So we will take the time for a few questions for Anthea. So if you have one, let's see, I don't know if I can see everyone quite yet, but if you want to just unmute yourself and ask the question, now is a great time for that.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay. Um, Thank you so much. That was a really lovely presentation, and I made artist books when I was in college, so I haven't thought about making art that way in a long time, but it really brought me back to that way of thinking. So I really appreciated this. I was wondering, Anthea, like, artist books are they're kind of a niche corner of the art world. I feel like they're sort of related to printmaking, and printmaking is its own niche, and artist books are even a niche within that. And I'm just wondering, I'm curious what your draw to thinking about artist books and making them and curating them is.
Oh, that's so, yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think for me, in that very first curatorial project that I did, I saw the possibility that art could really move into spaces that I didn't think it was possible. And even if we really just think about like one of our most cherished books, whether it's an artist book or not, we might carry it with us every day. We might take it on a plane. We might give it as a gift. We might share it with somebody and be angry if they don't return it to us. There's just so many ways that by entering into the form of an object that has this usefulness as a way of conveying information, artists are just able to explode the possibilities of the book form. And I think that it's very intimate, which I appreciate. And that intimacy leads to different kinds of encounters than we could have with other art forms. And it's funny, I often hear people say that artists' books are maybe, not a mainstream form of art making, but at the same time, like every major artist in the modern period made artist books as a complement and as a way of thinking within their practice. So we have artist books from, like I say, Louise Bourgeois, we have artist books from Picasso, we have artist books from um, like Alison Sarr. There's just so many artists who have made books, and it's I never see it as separate from an artist's practice. It is just one more form that artists use. And I also sometimes think from a curatorial perspective, like I don't want to put 20 books in a show and just have them all like sitting there. I want artist books to be in conversation with many different media, which is why curating embodied press, it was important to me that the books were in concert with video and with performance and with printmaking. So I think it's just a very social, flexible, exciting, kind of promiscuous medium. I know that was a long answer, but
That was
thank
great.
you
Does
for
someone
asking
else
your
want to
great
jump
question.
in?
Yeah.
Did I hear someone? Thought I did.
I have one question. Hi, Anthea.
Hi, Julia. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for this really thorough and wonderful conversation, presentation. I was wondering, since you also wear the hat of educator and teaching the book arts class, what you see in terms of like the interest in the upcoming generation, current student body, in book arts, like who's coming to the classes and where's like the drive and the hunger and the interest
Oh, interesting.
coming from?
Interesting. Um, hmm. It's true. I am, definitely making my bread and butter teaching students how to make artist books. I think in some ways, some of what I do in my work as an artist and curator is almost an antidote to that, because you can teach the same series of forms in a very rudimentary and very straightforward traditional way. But what I want to do in the field is a little bit different than, you know, the mechanics of how to create a very technically perfect piece, I guess. A lot of book arts programs are very invested in technique. CCA's book arts and letterpress has always been quite experimental, and I try to continue the legacy of Betsy Davids as a material innovator and just a really like experimental maker in terms of form. So the way that I teach book arts is very much from a conceptual perspective of the intersections between the book and the other media that students might be working in. So my students have made like ceramic books, textile books, photo books, and I try and just help them to bring the form alive in a really beautifully resolved material way. My students tend to be young women and young students who would define their gender identity as non-binary or trans or queer. I think that that has a lot to do with my practice and how I define my pedagogy. Certainly, that's not the extent of everybody who's interested in the field. But you know, doing my most recent essay, which is coming out in a new book from Routledge about the history of artist books in feminism. There is something about the book form that art historians have said is like of particular interest to women because I'm not sure if I would speculate in such a specific way, but because of its relationship to journaling, because of its relationship to you know, things that can be crafted at a smaller size, and that its relationship to domestic space, those are definitely like ideas that were coming from art historians in the 60s and 70s about why women were interested in artist books. I don't think that those are applying in the same way as they maybe were then. But a lot of the books from that period were discussing aspects of like, you know, women's experience that was not possible to discuss in other forums, like motherhood and domestic labor and economic security. Now, you know, the field is totally exploded. So I think any story that somebody wants to tell or any way of working with material is really possible. And the students are doing everything from like telling their coming out story to telling their family's ancestral histories of migration to the United States, and you know, there's many different ways that they approach it. I have a great ceramics student who's doing an artist book about sound right now, about the sound of clay, and so they really bring interesting ideas too.
Well, thank you. Well, with that, I think please join me. Let's all give Anthea a big round of applause. This will not be our only opportunity to interact. So if you didn't have the chance to ask your question, please save that. I will throw in the group chat, but a reminder that our next group event is taking place on Tuesday, December 16th, which we are meeting at SFNMWA at 2 p.m. for a tour of the Suzanne Jackson exhibition that will be led by Jenny Geith, who was our first consulting curator for SFNMWA. And then we will be going around 4 o'clock to Lorna's house for our annual holiday celebration. So please mark your calendar. And we're also working with Anthea to see if we can arrange a trip for the group to the Codex Book Fair, which is taking place in early February in Oakland. And at least one of the selected artists has work at that art book fair. So that's another thing we're looking into to bring our group so that we can continue fulfilling our mission of learning about women artists and educating ourselves about our current theme of book arts. So thank you, everyone. I don't know, does Lorna or anyone else want to say any last words?
I'll also invite you to Kala Art Institute. There's a exhibition that I'm taking part in, as well as many other artists, called Bookness, and it runs from this Saturday, November 22nd, through Codex. So there'll be events at the beginning and then also events in conjunction with the Codex International Artist Book Fair in February. So I hope to see you in person in February when we do our Codex tour. And yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect. And we can put a link to that exhibition in our upcoming newsletter too, Anthea, so it goes out to everyone. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying late, and we'll record this and send the link out to all members. So if you know someone who missed it, just recommend that they watch the recording so they can still learn all about book arts. And thank you to Grace for staying here through the end. I know it's late your time, but appreciate all of the members and the artists and everyone who joined us today. So thank you.
Jamie, I want to thank you again. And Anthea, this was just fabulous. So we're so excited about learning more about book arts and getting to know you better. And thank you, Grace, too.